All right. It's my first panel here in this room. This is beautiful. And it's my pleasure to bring both of you guys here to talk about, well, I mean, immersive filmmaking, but also, frankly, we could go a little bit deeper into the production side of Unification because there was so much to cover. We didn't have time to really do that on the panel, and I wanted to bring you in on that. But I'm so glad we're doing this here, and we should talk about what we did and how that was, all the things we learned, and also, part of why we did that piece was for the Vision Pro and for future immersive content, which is something that is, it's a really interesting topic. And it's something that as filmmakers and with the cameras that Blackmagic's doing, everything that we want to think about, and even the design language for that. I mean, I'm just seeing what comes out of the Vision Pro and looking at these things. It'd be great to just get our thoughts and pick all of our brains on that. So with that, I want to maybe start with you, Leo, just talking about your background and your experience on the project, and we'll kick it off from there.
Okay. Well, hi guys. Thank you. I was Leo. I'm Leo. I was the cinematographer for Jules and Carlos for Unification, and it was like it's been a ride. Like, first of all, because as a Star Trek fan, I'm a Star Trek fan, and then you wake up and you're like, whoa, I'm actually working on Star Trek, and like a lot of my team, they're all the biggest nerds ever, and we're all sitting there like pinching each other because it would be like we would be standing in line at Comic-Con too. That was the big difference for working with these guys, and it was so with that, and these guys are, we work on amazing stuff like that you've seen elsewhere. Like my entire team has been they're working right now actually. So but like to have a project like this that had so much passion and so much heritage, we knew that it was important to do it for the other guys in line at Comic-Con with us that weren't there. Matt, guys that have YouTube channels that are fans of the IP, and so for me it was an honor, but also it was scary because this is Star Trek. So they were prepared. They had great references. They had great direction, but we brought the technical muscle to actually shooting it. And yes, we did shoot it. And then they did their magic, but there was a lot of physical production involved. We weren't just typing prompts into a keyboard on location. So so that was that's been, and I'm in the immersive world. I do immersive video stuff for people, and then I also shoot on LED walls, and there's a lot of technology that surrounds a lot of the work that I do, but work like bringing all that stuff into an arena like for Jules and Carlos here for OTOY with the Star Trek IP was just been a dream. So that's it.
Carlos, I mean, we of course we did have a panel to talk about a bit of the production, but I mean, with Leo here, I mean, is there anything you wanted to sort of add or share in terms of, I mean, our challenges? I mean, we talked a little about the Huntington thing where we had to redo it, but I mean, also, I mean, we put in some pretty major machinery to shoot some of these shots and everything, and I mean, I think that and as we're sort of thinking also about the future, what do you think that might even change as a follow-up after that, after Carlos's input in terms of if you do it immersively and everything? We can even think about that yet, but Carlos, I mean, just again talking about that experience and the production stuff and working with Leo, I mean, anything to add to what he was just saying?
Well, working with Leo and Leo's team, Leo has a very impressive and inspiring relationship with his crew. So not only you get an incredible cinematography, you also are getting incredibly dedicated people, and on every aspect, the gaffer, the camera operator, the lighting, the grip, blah, blah. So to me, to see them in action in two pieces, because it was first Regeneration and then Unification, has been mind-blowing. I just wanted to put them on the spot just because. But then the other part too is that we speak so many similar language when it comes to lighting references, when it comes to, visuals. Like I think my first early thoughts or early, memories in Unification was Huntington location, where basically it was us. I think we went a couple times to just do location and just basically brought our cameras. We were not supposed to have cameras, so we just did a lot of iPhone. So we weren't really filming, but we really were filming. And but throughout those days, a lot of it was talking like, how do we want this to look? Like, what do we want the sun to take place? And in there, kind of like, so that's what has been great for me, is talking about how can we take this story and turn it visually with, for me at least, with both of you. So I don't even know if I answered that question, to be honest. I just started talking. So.
I just want to add one thing, like we're talking about the location thing, and this is actually really interesting, and I don't know how much of this you know, Jules, but because it was such a huge day, it was more than what we normally would use crew wise. We had probably 15 extra people lighting wise on that day, and because it's a big location. So I called my friend who was about to shoot a movie called The Mandalorian, and I'm like, "Hey, have you started yet?" And then he's like, Dave Klein. He goes, "No, we haven't started yet. What's up?" I'm like, "I need to borrow some of your guys." And so, and while we were shooting at Huntington Garden Part 2, it was half Star Trek and half Mandalorian on there, and it was like, and so my gaffer Hunter knows all those guys, and I know those guys too, and so they were like, "What's going on? What do you do?" We did Luke Skywalker like right here, like we just did it. We just did the in the bamboo, which is not far from where we shot, and they were like, "So what are we doing? Like, how does this work? How does it, like, where are the dots?" And I'm like, "No, there's no dots."
New technology.
And then they were like, "There's no dots." Okay, cool. And so it's like the Jets and the Sharks, like it's like Mandalorian on one side, Star Wars on one side, Star Trek on the other, and they're just like, and they and then when Jules and Carlos start doing their magic with stuff, and I'm like, you guys should take a look at what they're looking at, and then and then they were there, they were stunned, and they were like, why don't we have this technology? I'm like, I don't know. Yeah, I talked to Jules.
John Knoll did come by, and Sam and did a test. We were showing this stuff. It wasn't just Kevin Feige that got a little preview of it. I mean, people were hearing about the project. And thank God they kept it a secret, because I didn't want the beans to spill. And yeah, I mean, I think the fact that this can be done, the face digital makeup can be done in real time. It's like, even on our earlier panel, I didn't get a chance to explain how important that is. How you as a director, and Sam and Larry as actor, I mean, you could see what you're doing, and it's something that I didn't realize as we're developing this tech, that maybe there isn't a lot of other stuff out there that's that good, but apparently it is really pretty different from the other stuff out there.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, of course, like, I love Star Wars too. Like, Sam's from the Star Wars world, so there's a lot of love between Star Wars and Star Trek. It's not quite always at each other's throats.
Exactly.
They can coexist.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's a friendly thing, it's a friendly and to have that kind of caliber across the entire team was just like, it was a dream, and then everyone was like, when you showed up, like, I know I could remember Matty Corder or Dolly Grip, and he's like, "Wait, is that who I think it is?" And I'm like, "It is." He's got a huge Star Trek tattoo right here, and he's got a Star Wars thing right there, and it's like he's been. Yeah, my team's been with me for like 16 to 18 years, and we know where our scars are on each of us. So.
And then, what it was so great is I see all these people like, saying that, with somebody like Robin, and I didn't grow up. Unfortunately, I didn't grow up on Star Trek. So the whole time I'm like, I don't know. So who is that? I only knew about this character through Jules, through the story, that then he would give me the backstory. Then I would go and do my homework and rewatch those films and the original series. But and then you find the person. So I didn't start with the character. I started with the human being, and then I learn about the character, which is incredible.
Yeah. I mean, one of the reasons, we didn't get even to talk too much about the history of the earlier pieces, but, when we started, and, I had never done any filmmaking, thanks to my wife to push me into this, but, the first thing I did is I needed a director, right? And that's, Carlos, we were introduced through JJ, one of our common friends who works on, not JJ, he's an artist that's been working with me for a while. And, one thing that we connected on really, early on was like, we both loved Kubrick in 2001. And that's a style that is, I guess it's a choice, and even storytelling wise, and that's something that we had from the earliest pieces, and we, I think, try to carry over. And I think that, I do feel like as much as we're doing in this, in the rendering space and synthetic and whatever, it's like filming real things and having that authenticity is so fundamental. And that's why I'm so glad we did Unification the way we did. Which also, I guess, sort of segues a little bit into, unless you wanted to add anything on the 2001 stuff, because I know that's an important part for you too. And we did a full 2001 piece. If you go to the archive, there's a whole documentary on that. But do you want to talk about that a little bit before we go into some of the immersive stuff?
Yeah, so 2001 is like my top 5 films of all time for multiple reasons. Every time I watch it, I discover always new things, and it's almost like, it's almost like the type of storytelling that it speaks to you on a subconscious level more than a conscious level.
Yeah.
And that always was very appealing to me. And I love films that just really linger. Like you watch it and, they're not really the type of popcorn films, where you watch a film and then you finish it and you're like, well, I don't even know what the hell I just watched, but sure. These other films, and Kubrick, and Denis Villeneuve, we spoke. They just have this ability to stay with you for a long time, and so I've been studying them for a long time, and I think when we started talking about it, we talked about finding ways to let the storytelling kind of like, to let the audience figure out the 4. We given the 2 + 2, and you just let the audience do the 4. A lot of the times with movies, there is this exposition dump, or they want you to know everything. I don't want to know the ingredients of the meal. I'm just gonna, eat it, and then I'll tell you what I like or what I didn't like about it. Instead of. So I think Kubrick was one of the inspirations, and I think that kind of like continue with, as we were doing each of these pieces.
And as I mentioned, I mean, there's a whole thread between Roddenberry and Arthur C. Clarke when Gene was writing the novel. And again, the structured motion picture, the thing that I go gravitate back to, David Fine, who's been working on and Jaron too, I mean, for decades on restoring it. It is something where I think the ambition was, Douglas Trumbull from the work with Kubrick on the film, doing the effects for the motion picture. It was to try to capture that, and I think maybe it fell short from the audience perspective, but that ambition is very much something that I think is key to the things we were trying to connect to in our pieces, and it's been a great journey doing that. I
think it's also treating the audience in another level, instead of like telling them everything. We always talk about the less is more.
Yeah, I learned that from you, really. And
yeah, instead of like drowning the audience with a lot of things, we'll just do one thing, and now let's figure out much more interesting ways to say something, even if it's something simple,
So. Yeah. And I mean, the thing is, what I love about the way we did this is that I deliberately liked that you didn't have that experience in Star Trek, because I figure you're going to bring something in that maybe is missing a little bit from, the way that the formula that's been maybe perfected a little bit in the last 10 years for how Star Trek's done. And we have a whole team. We have the Roddenberry Archive team that's making sure everything we do, it's not just me, right, is canonically correct and there and everything. And it felt like, okay, well, with these pieces, let's see what we can do. And it honestly turned out better than I think any of us expected. And I think that, again, I mean, a lot of what the genesis of this project was that we were, especially with Paramount. Like, Paramount was like, you guys were doing you guys are the forefront of what could be happening with immersive. We were ready at launch with the Vision Pro app for the Roddenberry Archive, and there has definitely been. I mean, it's like it's a learning experience to sort of understand the design language for what could be coming next. I've been talking for decades about like holographic filmmaking, movies on the holodeck, but just seeing sort of how even Max versus the Vision Pro work. Like, do we want to abandon framing in these things? Do we want to go straight to 180 3D? Do we want to narrow things down? I mean, I think we didn't learn a whole lot from Meta launching the VR device, and it's just like one thing we maybe learned was don't do 360 movies. That doesn't necessarily help. Turning your head is terrible when you're watching a film, but there's still something incredible about true 3D. But I mean, I think we're still in the early stages of that, and I think, Leo, your experience just working in that world a little bit would be great to share with everyone, and I'd like to hear about that myself.
There's the thing about like one of the things, like I always equate it to, like, I used to, before I was in motion picture, but before I was in photo, I was in motion picture, and then I went back to, moved to photo, and then now I'm in motion picture again. And I'm saying all that because when you have a client and you have like an ad campaign and you shoot the commercial, they want a print campaign that matches the ad campaign. But the discipline in photography and the discipline in motion picture cinematography are two different disciplines. They use two different lighting. They're shooting at different apertures. The workflow is completely different. They're using different using digital backs that are huge with different kinds of framing. The aspect ratio is totally different, and so the workflow is different. And motion picture and immersive, it's the same thing. And so you have to learning the two different disciplines and then knowing how to streamline that is, I think, really important. That way you can, if you want to do like a traditional motion picture storyline and then you want to have a companion to the immersive version of that, or you want to incorporate the two into that, or some version of the two, you have to like learn the different ways of capture and workflow, and some things can bind up the other project, and so having two different teams like you normally would on a commercial can be difficult because you have to work around the talent. Usually the bottleneck is the talent, but as far as immersive goes, like there are things about it that when you're working in it and you're bringing these experiences to people that can't be there, I think that's the magic of it. That's like where it's like, okay, you want to see a birthday celebration in a little village on a little patch of island on the South Pacific, and you bring that to somebody in rural Iowa who's watching that and who would normally not be there, and then they get to experience that. It really humanizes the viewer, and it takes them there, and it makes them go, oh, curiosity is spurned, or an understanding might be unlocked, and in that experience, like I think that's where the power of immersive is, with the Vision Pro and other things like it. But I mean, Vision Pro does a really good job though. But yeah, so that's where to find that through line between narrative filmmaking, if it exists, and I think it can, and immersive filmmaking, those two disciplines, like the photo and the motion picture. I think there's an avenue there. It's just we haven't discovered it, or I think we have, but we're just
I mean, and it speaks to some of the thoughts that I've been having. Especially if we consider, let's say we're to do another one of these or do more of these. I mean, and we did a lot of immersive stuff related to NVIDIA. I mean, we put things in the archive app where you can see them in immersive, but it's not the full film. Because I think that the lesson I'm learning myself, and you can speak to this too, is I think you have to do it twice. I think to your point, there's a whole different, everything's different when you're doing it in immersive. And you have to think of, if you want to tell the same story, probably the shots are different. The way the choices you make have to be different. And it is doubling, the things. But then you have to think about, well, what is the immersive going to do that just watching it in a rectangle and even in 3D isn't? And to your point, there's probably a whole set of shots and things you can design for that. And I think we're so early. Like, I think people understand how to use AI and what that might mean more than they might how the different pieces of immersive will work. It's still the Vision Pro, which to be honest, I've never seen that kind of quality in a headset until this thing came out. So for me, the experiences prior to that on anything else don't compare, and they don't really matter. So it's more like, well, that device is the threshold of where things become interesting. And I think that, we still want to tell stories. I mean, there's a lot of documentaries like on the Vision Pro and the concerts and things like that, but I, Submerged, the submarine one was the first time I'd seen 17 minutes of an actual production. And it was funny. When I was watching it, I was like, well, when you're doing a close-up, it feels like you're watching theater. And sometimes you're seeing, even though it's 180, I'm seeing something on the side of my eye that's distracting me. And I'm taking notes and thinking about it. Like, well, if I'm going to do one of these for the same way we did Unification, I mean, there's still things that you want to play with and change. And I think, to your point, it is a different medium, but that's also something that can be incredibly powerful. I mean, just like many other forms of media that came after the last one. I mean, there was film before there was television, and where anything to add to that on your side? I mean,
yeah, I'm trying to not break any rules. But
from a creative perspective.
From a creative perspective, yeah, it's once you figure out where the shot, and that's the thing. This is the thing about immersive that I really like. I have a theory about that the best stewards of the immersive experience are usually have a still photography background. And this is why, because usually you look at good photojournalism and you can see an entire story, or you can look at poster art, and you see the entire movie or the entire story in one photograph, and it tells everything. It tells the drama. It tells where the contrast is, and it leaves it has the question for the viewer, like what's going to happen here, or is this really, and so now the viewer is inside the photograph, and we all have a time life photograph that we all know about, that we think about, as a one complete story, and that's what immersive is. And if you put that into a still photograph and then you move it, and then now you're in that photograph and you're looking around, that's where I think it's like kind of the most powerful. Now, if there's a bull charging at you on a certain project I was on, and that's scary, if that's what the experience is, then that's part of it. But but there's also other parts, where you just experience the crowd. There was a shoot in a rodeo, and some of the vignettes of capturing the people who are experiencing it were, I think, just as powerful as some of the action of the stampede and the barrel racing and everything. But when you can look at that person who has their daughter in the stands, and then they're having conversation with each other, and it's almost like you're right there, and she's playing with her hair as she's watching the barrel racing going, and it's just you can just see that, and you can feel that, and I think that's what is really powerful about immersive, is taking you there, taking somebody who's locked in a wheelchair for someplace, and they get to be riding and on a horseback someplace, and it's really powerful, and if it's utilized the right way, I think it can be used for storytelling.
Yeah, I mean, Carlos, going back to you on just you come from largely in the animation space where you have full control. I mean, ultimately, right? And so, which is also my background a little bit. I mean, just on the rendering tools. But I mean, if you had sort of as a director, I mean, I think we both love, all of us, the framing of cinema and film. But if you had the freedom, let's say it was Unreal, where in previous, and that was the way you told the story, would you choose that? I mean, what do you feel just creatively about more freedom, more something that sort of breaks the traditional film thing as we're telling a story that's like a film? I mean, how does that make you feel as a director, and does that inspire you in different ways? I mean, that would be my question to you on this.
Yeah, it's interesting because as I was hearing you guys talk, I remember like maybe like between 5 and 10 years ago, a friend of mine was directing a short film for Oculus. And I got a chance to see kind of like the early prototype, I guess, as they were working. So I put on the glasses and I'm like looking around, and I'm like, this is amazing. But then the action of the story was happening somewhere around there.
Exactly.
And I found myself like, but that is so cool. Look at these textures. Like, that's just great, And then I take out the glasses. And it's like, well, but the action was happening in there. So I do come from that place where, I want to take the audience and I want them to be on a storytelling control environment. But I think with immersive, you're always going to find two types of audiences. And I think it's just for that audience to know what kind of experience. Do they want to be active? Do they want to be essentially the camera operator? Wherever I'm looking at, that's where the action is happening. Or do they just want to be, sit down, relax, and enjoy and take me for a ride? So I feel like there is a particular audience for a particular medium, in my opinion. There's multiple opinions, but.
I mean, Marvel did and Disney's an investor in OTOY, and we talked to the team. I mean, they did an app for Vision Pro, What If, and it's in the animated style, but it's a full 3D. Like I feel almost like a game engine. I'm experiencing driving it, and it's and it's tough. I mean, I remember experiencing it and thinking like I am being pulled in too many directions. I'm starting to feel that. I mean, there is something magical about feeling you're seeing something in front of you that's real, and it's not necessarily in a film screen, but you don't want to move your head around. And I think that if you're doing something different where you're interacting, it almost changes the entire structure of how you tell the story. So that's what I'm trying to sort of think about, even for us, and even for future projects we do, of like, what's the happy medium of filmmaking that leverages this sort of spatiality or immersiveness of it without breaking the fundamental tenets of experiencing and telling a story. Because your point, I mean, that was why 360 died. I think you can't, if you're looking around at stuff and the action's happening here, there's no way. But on the other hand, I mean, it's also, 3D films have come and gone, and now with the Vision Pro, every 3D film, I got all of them. I can watch them again in 3D. And it's been weird for me because I've at first I'm like, I think this is great, but then I'm like, I can just tell that this is like, Real D did the, just layers, and so it makes me sort of question just where again, I think there's incredible potential in even just this, 3D part of this, because when it's done right, and when you see some of these early like IMAX things that were focused on that, it's great. But I feel like we haven't had the medium that's been large enough to explore doing 3D or immersive until, with Vision Pro, and it's still early stages, but. Yeah, I mean, I'm so glad we're having this conversation because it just moves the needle forward in exploring these new opportunities. And, watching things on the Vision Pro is definitely one of the things I do the most with my device, and yeah, it's future is fascinating. And we have talked about the AI side of things where that conversation can lead us, but yeah.
I have a friend that actually uses the Vision Pro. He's completely gotten rid of all his monitors.
Yeah, I tried that.
Like big monitors, and he said on the Vision Pro there is no limits as to how many monitors
there isn't.
I get to have. And you don't need a large room anymore. So there is just a lot of pluses, not just on the immersive storytelling.
Yeah. Well, I think to wrap up, I mean, I was thinking about our conversation yesterday, because we were just talking a bit about today, and. Remember, we were, just because I was talking about I don't know if you saw my talk, but I was showing maybe I did show you all the generations with You're at the Fountain, right? Which is the one shot where we're like, okay, we didn't quite get the coverage we needed, and it was only the Higgs one out of 19 different video generation models. They all just didn't give me what I wanted. Even the Higgs one they did, it took me a bunch of tries. It'd be half a day just to get something that would have taken us probably not that long to film. But I think that the idea is that whatever the technology is, the storytelling trumps everything. And I think what happened with Unification was that, I mean, however it turned out, I mean, it moved people. The story that we told, or shared was deeply moving. And I think however we approach the content, I think storytelling is at the heart of it. And I love that. And I think that's certainly part of the future. And I don't know if you guys wanted to close out by sharing your thoughts on that, but. Yeah.
Well, one of the things I was going to mention is, there's so much talk about AI. And it's moving exponentially by the minute in every area. I mean, every other day now I open Instagram and there's some new evolving AI thing that now you can brush your teeth with AI controls that, it's all over, and it just feels like Midjourney just came out like less than a year ago. It hasn't, but it really feels like that new. I think one thing that I've been noticing more and more is like, I think as storytellers, AI keeps on bringing stuff from the box. Like I was talking about it with a friend. It's just like, AI is just recycling a lot of things that are already on this box. And I feel like our job is to step outside that box and really see what are the areas that where the AI is not pulling from. Is our job, and I think also for artists and for filmmakers and for to kind of like look outside and really think, be more inventive that way. And I think that's part of like where the storytelling and telling a good story with characters, I think that's kind of like our job. I mean, when I look at 99% of these AI videos that are, these trailers, AI, it's very lifeless. Now you just see this person that is like doing this, like, and it's just like there's
even the really good stuff I can see
you can feel it.
It's different than CG, but that looks CG in this movie, right? And that's because you can do amazing CG, obviously, right. And I think we've done some of that. But there is an AI look, and there's also even if there isn't a look, it's like, well, everybody has this now. It's like with the conversation we had with people, where it's like, well, everyone has a phone that can shoot 4K 120, which is something nobody even had 10 years ago. Doesn't mean everybody's a filmmaker, and I think that just means it just levels up. You got to tell great stories and have something meaningful, and then it's the that's the meat of it.
Yeah, and to build on both of those things, the watching you guys in the field, I've been a DP for a while now, but like, this is amazing what you guys are capable of. But then as a nuts and bolts, I can light this, like just like TOS. Whatever, I can light this like, generations, I can, do all these samples, but like to watch all the nuances and the little micro corrections, what we're doing on set and with the actors and micro corrections with, the content and with the blocking, and that's altogether human. And that is the fingerprint of humanity that we put on Unification amid all the technology, that the DNA of the project is human, and so when you and it's just augmented by things here, like a nice hammer, a really nice hammer, but at the heart of it, it's the filmmaker, it's the story, it's the it's the heritage of in this case Star Trek, and that was when you have that double helix that's running through it, and from that you can have the permutations, but in the middle you have the story, and Carlos is put the teardrop in it, and the structure was Jules, and then it's just like to watch that all play out as a cinematographer, as a fan, as the guy that stands in line with you at Comic-Con, like that was magic to me, and like I was like, we can make more of those. That'd be fun, like that would be pretty cool, and as long as that through line of like the storytellers in there, and that we're not relying too much on.
Yeah, I don't think any of us want to even touch anything different than that. I think our collective experience has been back to going back to this and focusing on that, and I think that's also what audiences long in the future will respond to. So with that, I will say my last line is the human adventure is just beating the end line from Star Trek the Motion Picture. Thank you guys for joining me on this panel. This is great.
Yeah, it's an honor.
Thank you.
Everyone.
All right.